Welcome back, everybody, to our special two-part series on our top 10 NFL franchises of all time. With us today, obviously, we got Richie up here, we got Idris to the bottom, and we got Brett. Over the first hour, we talked about franchises 6 through 10. Talked about the New England Patriots at number 6, the Kansas City Chiefs at 7, Chicago Bears at 8, Oakland/Los Angeles/Las Vegas Raiders at 9, and our Denver Broncos at 10. Now we get to the meat. We get to talk about the top 5 NFL franchises of all time. I'm excited about this. Richie, get us going on this one.
Yay. San Francisco 49ers, who we picked at 5. This is it's debatable to say the least. Jerry Rice, arguably the greatest offensive player, the greatest player in NFL history, possibly. They drafted him out of Mississippi Valley State. Little known fact, Joe Montana already had 2 Super Bowl victories before they even drafted Jerry Rice. But when I think about just pure excellence during the 1980s, what Bill Walsh did with this team, the way that he essentially changed not only the way that offense was coached, but also the way that defense was played. I think that was the kind of influence that Bill Walsh had on this 49er team.
Yeah, and we're talking about an NFL team that has been around since 1946. Mm-hmm. We're talking about a team that, when you think about the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, 2010s, and even as far as today,
they should have been the 46ers. Go ahead.
They should have been the 40s. But it's a long list of Hall of Famers. It's a long list of greatness. During the 80s, that was the NFL team, was the San Francisco 49ers. During the 90s, well, they ran into another team that just happened to top them. And, you could have gone back and forth with the Cowboys and Niners, but the fact is the Cowboys owned the 90s. Mm-hmm. But with the 49ers, when you look at what that team has done since their existence, I mean, it speaks volumes about what they are. And not only that, we're talking about a team that's been to 7 Super Bowls, has won 5, lost 1 to the Baltimore Ravens, and one of the most questionable things that ever happened when the lights go out.
Yeah.
And, there's all the conspiracy theorists that will sit there and say, oh, the lights went out on purpose because they wanted to make that game close. Maybe, maybe not. But at the end of the day, Colin Kaepernick was leading that team for a possible go-ahead score. And while I think they should have been running the ball with Frank Gore, I think he had Vernon Davis wide open in the end zone, but instead he kept going to Michael Crabtree and was testing, at the time, the greatest corner of the game in Richard Sherman. And then you fast forward to the last couple of years. Here's a team that had the lead on the Kansas City Chiefs with 7 minutes left in the Super Bowl. Had the game locked up. Had a great defense to finish that game off, but Jimmy Garoppolo made a couple of questionable plays. Jimmy Garoppolo, just a couple of things could have gone a little differently, and we're talking about the 49ers being a 6-time Super Bowl winning team. And we look at the 49ers of this year. A lot of people had them going to the Super Bowl. But what happened? They ran into, Dallas should have beat them. I'm not going to get into that. Then they go play Philly, and I always thought that the 49ers reminded me of the 2017 Minnesota Vikings. But when you look at the 49ers, there's just so much history to look at since their existence. 5 Super Bowls speaks a lot. Don't have any championships pre-merger, but when you look at what they have done over the last 6 decades, it speaks volumes to this team as a whole. I'll leave it at that.
49ers got one of the. I think about Merton Hanks, the chicken neck dance. Shaq did it. Yeah, Keena Turner, Tom Rathman, Roger Craig. I think Roger Craig was like the beginning of that running back that can run and catch the ball. John Taylor, Jerry Rice. Those early 80s, 90s teams, man, they were crazy. They took a little break off. Then here we go in the last decade or so. They've been coming on strong. And I'm one of those who believe that the lights went off to change the complexion of the game.
Yeah.
Because 49ers are getting run. They were getting killed. And going back to Super Bowl with Kansas City, they celebrated too soon. They had to leave, running in the end zone. Look at us, look at us, look at us. Defense forgot to play. They forgot to finish the game. Offense forgot to finish the game. Kansas City won a championship. Their first few years, before the merger, yeah. Steve Spurrier. Who else they had back there? Oh, I can't think of the name. They had Willie Gault, after the merger. But 5 Super Bowls. And had it not been for Dallas in the 80s and 90s, they may have more. But Dallas was too strong.
and I mean, when you're a top 10 team in all-time wins, that's something that also needs to go into consideration here when it comes to the 49ers, because when you compare them to the other 9 teams, well, the one thing that they have is the fact that they've been to 7 Super Bowls.
The 49ers are one of those teams, when they're good, they're good. When they're bad,
they are bad.
They're bad.
And I mean, not to take anything away from the team itself, because they're great. The one thing I've hated about this team out here, and I'll be honest with you, was the move from San Francisco to Santa Clara.
Yeah.
And I think that because when I think about a stadium and a Super Bowl, going from Candlestick, and I've gone to Candlestick, and I've also gone to Levi's Stadium. I was there to watch the Romo broken rib game where Patrick Willis, phenomenal play. I met Patrick Willis, by the way, on a plane on my way back from Las Vegas to San Jose Airport. Anyways, just to watch that move, it showed a lot about the fans, because when you looked at the 49ers, 2019, 18, 17, the fans weren't there.
Nope.
But then they start putting together a couple of wins and things like that. Oh, and the fans are back, and I'm not going to call them fair weather fans by any means, because their franchise is what it is. But it's just when, I think it can also be said that when you're talking about the greatest receiver, you're talking about the catch that happened against my Dallas Cowboys. You're talking about, in my opinion, and I'm going to let Brett rebuttal this one, the greatest quarterback of all time in Joe Montana. There's a lot to speak of on this San Francisco 49er team. Should be higher if they win a couple more Super Bowls. But you got to talk about the history. Brett, go ahead.
Yeah, when I think about the Niners, I think of Ronnie Lott. I think of the cutting off his own finger, the raw, mentality, the grit. Jerry Rice, Joe Montana, Roger Craig, John Taylor, Tom Rathman. I mean, Jesus, the list goes on. The 80s 49ers were it. They were the team to beat. Dallas came around, gave them a run, and then San Fran came back again. Was it 96 against Oakland? Steve Young finally won it. And then was it Oakland or San Diego?
Stan Humphries was not the quarterback of Oakland, sir. It was San Diego.
It was San Diego. I'm sorry. Uh-huh. For some reason I thought Oakland. I don't know why.
What have the Raiders done in the 90s?
His backup was the Vlasic man.
But then
Vlasic, the pickle man.
And then T.O. came around. They had a shot. With Jeff Garcia. And then Kaepernick came around. They had another shot. Now you got Bosa. You know what I mean? So it's I think you guys are gonna continue.
There's no you guys. There's no 49 fan here.
Yeah, well, it is what it is.
But then it goes to the previous episodes Richie and I did. We're talking about the greatest teams. The top 2 teams were San Francisco 49ers, the greatest seasons. And then when we talk about the greatest teams that never did it, the 49ers was at the top of the list. So these 49ers teams have been historically great during the Super Bowl era, but a lot of that starting in the late 70s, specifically when the drafting of the one Notre Dame great Joe Montana.
Yeah, I mean it's Joe. That was cool Joe before the new cool Joe came in. No, it's I like San Fran on this list. That's a tough team to beat. I mean they have it. They had it all back then. You know, the Bill Walsh, the whole evolution of the offense. You know, the West Coast offense. He did it all. No, I'm happy with that pick. I like the Niners at the 4 pick.
And you know, and when I think of the Niners, obviously I think of Montana, Jerry Rice. I actually liked Ricky Waters. I thought he was a great running back during his time. But the reason why they're not 4 on this list is because they only have 5 Super Bowls. But when I think of the 49ers, I don't think of a specific name to the team like when I think of our number 4 team, the Steel Curtain, the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yep.
Hang on 1 second, Zappy. I apologize. Just want to bring this back for one final thought on these guys before we get to the Steelers. We talked about, you and Brett were both speaking about how the Cowboys came, the Niners came, clash, bang, bang, that they were always fighting each other. And yet Buffalo as the constant in the AFC.
Mm-hmm.
I think the play that dictated the two most instrumental changes at the quarterback position in my lifetime both occurred with New York teams. New York Giants injured Joe Montana, essentially end his 49er career. He did appear in a game for the 49ers at the very end of his stint there, but it was a year and a half later. He goes to KC. We know the story. Mo Lewis almost killed Drew Bledsoe. Tom Brady comes to be. The similarities and the eeriness of the two dynasties is pretty wacky when you look at it from that lens. That's really all I wanted to say. But I do believe that that changed history on both spectrums of both teams.
You know, that Giants Niners game, I had that recorded on a VHS. I had that my old man recorded that game on a VHS tape, and I think I still have it at the house.
Yeah, it was a classic.
You know what's crazy too is when
you
think about the Niners and the reason why they could have been the Super Bowl champs in 1990, the reason why they couldn't have been the Super Bowl champs in 1986 is because of that shirt that Mr. Ritchie is wearing right now. You know, they could have easily been champs in other Super Bowls, but the Giants came along and said, no, not so fast. We got this one.
I liken it to what happened with your team and the Steelers in the 70s. It was the Steelers' decade. Your team got some of that. You know, you played them twice, and unfortunately you didn't get your split at least. I think you should have got a split. That's the way the breaks go sometimes. But, like, that's kind of how I see, like, we were the second best team of the decade because we're the only other team in that decade to win 2.
And not to change the subject or anything.
Denver, but yeah.
Just for the viewers, everyone, Idris, we lost him momentarily. He did have a power outage at his house right now. He's trying to see if he can come on live through his phone, but hopefully he's rejoining us. He did want to speak heavily on our number 4 team, but just for anyone that's wondering what happened to Idris, it's because Mother Nature or whatever it is decided to kill his power.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man.
I bet you $100 my old man still has that VHS tape.
Number 4, the Steel Curtain. Mean Joe Green, Jack Lambert, Franco Harris, Lynn Swann, Terry Bradshaw, Jerome Bettis, Big Ben, Bill Cowher. The list goes on and on and on.
Hines Ward,
the man, the guy that sat in my vehicle yesterday, in probably the greatest wide receiver in Pittsburgh Steeler history, our number 4 team. It's an argument, at least what he could do with the ball. But when we talk about this Steelers team, we're talking about a team that has won 6 Super Bowls. Yes, 4 of them did come in the 70s. They've been to 8 Super Bowls. They didn't get their first Super Bowl loss until Super Bowl 30 in the trifecta versus the Dallas Cowboys. You know, they always say third time's a charm, and it literally took the Dallas Cowboys 3 times to beat that Pittsburgh Steelers team. Was not the same team, granted, but history is history.
And you better
Dallas
thank God that it wasn't the same team, because those 70s Steelers defenses were like, they were next level. We talk about what the Raiders meant to the league, and we talked about what the Rams could have been. When you look at the Steelers of the 70s, that's what the Raiders could have been. The Raiders had just enough of where I still consider them legendary for that time in the league. But once again, that was the Steelers' decade. They beat the Raiders and the Cowboys, 2 teams whose decade it could have been.
And, you know, we're talking about, this is the first team to go back-to-back twice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and a lot of people will argue that second back-to-back team, when they faced the Cowboys in 77, that Cowboys team should have won. Didn't. You know, you think about Lynn Swann making that catch. You think there's so much history with this.
Yeah, that's an
Pittsburgh
iconic
Steelers team.
play. Once again, Raiders and Steelers. That's an iconic play, the Immaculate Reception.
It is. And I mean, oh man, it's just there's so much great things to say about the Steelers. You know, you always ask about who is your favorite team, this and that, obvious, but a lot of fans have a second team they secretly cheer for. Mine is the Steelers, even with the history behind the Cowboys and Steelers and facing each other in 3 Super Bowls. A lot of it was because growing up, my best friend, his dad was a huge Steelers fan. My best friend was a huge Steelers fan. You know, but even in the Steelers of the 90s, when you think about Jim Harbaugh and Captain Comeback and almost pulling off the comeback that led to the Steelers advancing to Super Bowl 30 when the Colts went for that Hail Mary, it was there.
You thought it was a catch, right?
I thought it was
initially.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
did too. I thought the Colts won the game, and then they realized they didn't.
But I thought it was a catch. My heart stopped.
And you know how bad that would have been for the Steelers? Because the year before, they lost to the San Diego Chargers while they were basically knocking on the doorstep of their end zone in the old Three Rivers Stadium. That would have essentially been losing at the last second at home in a title game 2 years in a row.
Absolutely. And
that's what almost happened.
And, you know, and then we're going to talk about this. There's only 3 coaches in NFL history that have won 4 or more Super Bowls. The first coach to do it came from Pittsburgh, and that was Chuck Noll.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're talking about, when we say Hall of Famers, obviously the Bears lead the way, but the Steelers are right there on them. And I think it's fair to say that the Steelers will surpass the Bears here in the next coming years.
They should. Yes,
they should. And, you know, they're 26 Hall of Famers. That's what they are. And then when I think of the Steelers of the 90s, I think of a couple of names, and I'm going to focus on the defensive side. Levon Kirkland, Kevin Green, Chad Brown, Rod Woodson, Carnell Lake. They had some phenomenal defensive players that, quite frankly, I was worried in that Super Bowl playing the Steelers, you know, because of their defense. And I remember watching, there was a poster I had, and it was it took every Cowboy to come and bring down their running back. And no, it was not Jerome Bettis. It was Bam. What was his name?
Bam Morris.
Bam Morris. Thank you.
Who replaced Barry Foster from the year before.
Yes, he did. And, you know, and a lot of people will sit there and say that was a bot Super Bowl. Vinny Testaverde Neil O'Donnell purposely threw those interceptions to Larry Brown. Whatever it is that it isn't. But, you know, that's a Super Bowl right there that the Steelers could have won.
Did they forget that Neil O'Donnell wasn't that good? Did that slip somebody's memory?
It is. And, you know, I think maybe if they had Cordell Stewart starting the whole game, I think maybe it would have been a different outcome, because Cordell Stewart, when he came out of Colorado, we had never seen anything like this before.
Slash.
You know, that's what he was. It was
Slash. That's when he was going by Slash still, because he wasn't like the guy yet. Exactly. He didn't get his chance until later in the decade.
And then when we talk about teams with multiple quarterbacks in the Hall of Fame, the Steelers are in that conversation where we're talking about Terry Bradshaw, Big Ben's going to get into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
There's no question about it.
Mhm.
But just even as recent as now with Mike Tomlin, throughout his tenure as the Pittsburgh Steelers head coach, has yet to have a losing season. That speaks volumes about the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers. That speaks volumes about the history of the Steelers altogether. They are one of the greatest teams. And when you look at from a wins perspective, number 4 in all-time wins, right behind the Packers, Bears, and Giants. And quite frankly, they're going to catch those teams, I believe. I think they have the best chance of catching the Giants first.
Yeah.
But they still have a bit of a hill to climb. But when you talk about greatest teams of all time, the Steelers are one of the first teams that come up. And the other thing I think of is one thing: the terrible towel. Every time you'd watch games, the Steelers were the reason why other teams in their stadiums have fans waving a towel around. Is because they were the ones that created that. It was the Pittsburgh Steelers, dating back to the 70s with the terrible towel. Bretsky?
Yeah, it's it's a steel curtain. I mean, you guys said it all, man. I mean, you guys named all the players. Roethlisberger, he's a Hall of Famer. Bennett's going to be a Hall of Famer. All those players back in the 70s. The steel curtain was, I mean, Jesus, they were brutal, man. I remember watching Monday night games with my old man, the old Three River Stadium, and all you saw was the terrible towels and those 4 guys. Like, that was what the team was known for. And they were fun to watch, man. I have no problem saying that they are great. Yeah, there it is. I have no problem saying that they were they're top 5 franchise team. No problem saying that. I mean, the black and gold is no joke.
It's no joke. And also, when you think about top 5 fan bases of all time, the Steelers are on there.
I mean, they travel well. They travel
very well.
The rest of them.
They really do. And it's just the Steelers could be higher, but it's just you cannot put them higher than the other teams. Not yet, at least. Not yet. Maybe Kenny Pickett is the next great quarterback for this team. Maybe.
I mean, he's a Pittsburgh native, so
you never know. And maybe George Pickens becomes the greatest Pittsburgh Steeler wide receiver to ever play the game. That would speak a lot because Lynn Swann, Hines Ward, even when Yancey Thigpen was there, he was great. Ernie Mills was a pretty good receiver for them too. Had some good tight ends to come through, but they've had some great running backs.
They've had great running backs, yeah, 100%.
Last thought on the Steelers. I think they're an entity on their own. But even if you talk about the Bill Cowher era, and he had actually spoken on it during the playoffs, this year's playoffs in the CBS studio, he was like, we were not exciting, quote unquote, for people to watch in the sense that our games were very low scoring during that era. Talking about the 90s Steelers that ultimately he ended up winning a Super Bowl in the early 2000s. But I think it was the first real jolt that the Steelers got to getting back to what they used to be, being that 70s team. And, Hall of Famers galore. I think the only reason why our next team would be ahead is I think there's a little more spacing out of just being relevant in other decades. That is a big driving force of how we pick these teams on this list. Zappy knows these guys. The Dallas Cowboys, America's team. 5 Super Bowl victories, 3 of those in the 90s, which formulated their dynasty. They lead the NFC East in division titles. Their 92 offensive line, on the eye test, from what I've seen, greatest O-line of all time. Emmitt Smith is the NFL's all-time leading rusher, and I didn't even talk about the defense yet. I liken the Cowboys, their image, what they bring to the table. Not everyone likes them. Some people love them. But one thing about the Dallas Cowboys is that you're always going to talk about them. And I find it similar to what the Lakers are to basketball and to what the Yankees are to baseball, in the sense that whether it's a good Yankee team, a bad Yankee team, the late George Steinbrenner always had a way to make us believe that this is our year. Not too many owners have the ability to truly make you believe that every friggin' year. But Jerry Jones, like him or not, is one of those people.
Yeah, and when I think about the Cowboys and I'm thinking about the Steelers, one thing why the Cowboys are higher, in my opinion, is because since 1960, when the Cowboys came along, they have pretty much been relevant year in and year out. It took them a couple years, and they were in the Super Bowl. 70s, the only reason why we're talking about the Cowboys not being a 3-time or 4-time Super Bowl champ in the 70s is because they had some great matches with the Pittsburgh Steelers, with the Miami Dolphins. And then we're talking about a team that was very, very relevant in the 90s. They kind of fell off in the 2000s, but in the 2010s was relevant, 2020s. And then you look at just the grand scheme of things. Tom Landry was with this team from 1960 to 1989. That's a very long time for one coach, and it's
hard to fathom.
It really is, and it took a young man out of Arkansas, a young man that was a graduate of the University of Arkansas that tried to start a chain of pizza restaurants in the state of Missouri that failed, went into the oil industry and bought the Cowboys for $500 million. And now we're talking about the most valued franchise in all of sports, being valued at over $8 billion. And we talk about what Jerry Jones, and I'm going to say it again, Brett, what Jerry Jones has done for the NFL as an owner of the Dallas Cowboys. He is the driving force behind what the NFL is today. And here's a guy that's been around now for 33 years? And it's just, there's so much to it. And when you think of the Cowboys, you're thinking of a Danny White, who, in my opinion, is right up there with quarterbacks that never could get it done. Danny White was a great quarterback, but Roger Staubach was just a little better. Troy Aikman was a great quarterback. Tony Romo was a good quarterback. Dak, we'll see what we say about him in 10 years. A lot of Cowboys fans say he's great. Others say he's not. We'll see. In my opinion, last chance. Besides the point. But, you think about a team that's been to 8 Super Bowls. 2 of them that they lost were to the Steelers, yet again, and their other one was to the Dolphins. That 90s team, the 92 Cowboys, in my opinion, one of the greatest teams in NFL history. It didn't matter who they were playing. They were going to win. That Super Bowl against the Buffalo Bills, 52-17, should have been 59-17 if it wasn't for Mr. Leon Lett. Then to go back-to-back and play Buffalo again and face real adversity going into halftime down 13-6, and then come back and completely shut out that Buffalo Bills team and win 30-13. Then could have gone back-to-back, but then we had the drama happen between Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson. And we saw what that led to. We saw Deion Sanders go to San Francisco. We saw Ken Norton Jr. leave Dallas to go to San Francisco, and they get the victory against the Chargers. But then the Cowboys came right back in Super Bowl 30 with Barry Switzer. And a lot of people say they've been irrelevant since, and that's not even a word, but they haven't been relevant since their last Super Bowl in Super Bowl 30. But fact is, they've been in the conversation for a very long time. And when people say NFL teams, the first team that usually comes out of people's mouth is the Cowboys. And it's not because they love them. It might be because they hate them, or it's going to be because they love them. This is the team that has, when you look at all the top viewed games in NFL history, the Cowboys are right up there in number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. People tune in to watch the Cowboys. Whether it's to win or lose, people are tuning in. And that speaks volumes about a team that has been around since 1960, not a team that's been around since 1935 or 1923 or 1922, whatever the case is. They've only been around for 63 years, and yet they are the most talked about, the most valuable franchise in all of sports, everything. And really, If Jerry Jones didn't make the mistake of firing Jimmy Johnson, we would be talking about arguably the two greatest coaches to ever coach coming out of Dallas, and Jimmy Johnson and Tom Landry.
You could have. But nothing is going to change my mind about Jerry Jones. I've hated him since day one. Richie knows my feelings on this. No, I can't vouch for Jerry. I think he's a piece of shit. I just don't. I never understood the fact of the owner being on the field telling the coach what to do. And he's done that frequently over the past 10, 15 years. He's always on the field. Like during the game, not just before the game. Before the game, I can understand. You say hi to your players, wish them luck, whatever. But he's on the field during the game.
Well, he hasn't been on the field during the game in years.
Years?
Yeah.
The last time I saw it was about 2 years ago. Less than 2 years ago.
Mm-mm. That was something he did in the 90s.
No.
Early 2000s.
He still does it. I saw it. It was almost 2 years ago.
I don't know what you saw, but he hasn't done that in years.
No, I saw it happen. Like,
Brad, I'm not arguing with. This is what I mean.
But dude, I was on the show with you. Like this.
Yeah, you said it. Why you hate him? But that doesn't mean that he still does it.
Well, maybe not now, but he did it almost 2 years ago, if that. But I'm sorry, dude. I'm not going to vouch for Jerry. Like I don't know. I don't know what it is. I just can't. I can't stand the guy. I'm sorry, dude.
I just think it's funny because you can't stand him, yet you love Bob Kraft.
Just like you guys can't stand Bob Kraft.
You probably like Jerry Jones. I just think it's hilarious.
Maybe but I haven't met him.
I just think it's hilarious on a lot of levels because they're two billionaires. Like they're this, and so many levels they are literally the same guy. The only difference is that Goodell lets it be known that he don't like Jerry, and Goodell pretends to not like Kraft. It's freaking comical, though.
No, it is, and really, I will say this about the Cowboys and the Steelers, because you can go back and forth with these two teams, and I think they both present a very good argument to be number 3 and number 4. I mean, when you talk about teams in history with all-time playoff wins, Pittsburgh and Dallas are tied with that mark at 36.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's just like there's so many variables that go into this. There really is. But, this is one of those that you have to break it down even further when it comes to Pittsburgh and Dallas. I can't put them top 2. I love my Cowboys. I do. But I have to remove my personal bias about my team. Because honestly, when we're talking about the top 2 teams, or at least when we're going into our number 2 team, I'm going to bring them in because I know there's someone right now that's going to speak very highly about them. We're talking about an NFL team that before the merger was a 4-time champ, 4-time. And since the merger has been a 4-time Super Bowl champ. Mm-hmm. We're talking about a team that defeated the greatest team to ever be put on field, was one game away from being undefeated. No. I mean, this is a fact, man. This is not to dish you. But you cannot take away from what Eli Manning has done. You cannot take away from what Phil Simms did. And you cannot take away from the fact that they have had the greatest defensive player to ever play the game. Coming in at number 2 is Mr. Richie Hicks, the host of our show, his New York Giants.
Oh, man.
Take it
the
away.
Duke Wellington Mara's nickname, game is short on every football. A lot of people don't know this. A lot of people don't care. But most people don't know this. That's really what it is. Lawrence Taylor, last defensive player to win a league MVP, as Zappy kind of alluded to in Zappy's opinion, as in mine. the greatest defensive player to ever play this game. One of the biggest things about the Giants from a historical level is that they have always birthed great coaches. Sadly, they haven't always been able to keep all of them. You talked about the great Tom Landry. We talk about the guy that this trophy is named after, Vince Lombardi. The Giants had both of them on the same coaching staff. This is a team that you fast forward into the Super Bowl era. Had Bill Belichick, Bill Parcells, and Tom Coughlin all on the same staff. This is a team that also had Sean Payton as an assistant with his first NFL coaching gig underneath Jim Fassel in 2000. Quite frankly, if the Giants don't make the grave mistake of letting Vince Lombardi go, I don't know if the Green Bay Packers would still be in existence today. I feel that strongly about that.
And that's going to be in my opinion, one of the greatest debates in NFL history. It's the same thing. While people talk about Belichick and the Browns, you talk about Vince Lombardi and the Giants. And we're talking about the name on the trophy. It's literally the Lombardi Trophy named after Vince, and a lot of people don't know that about Vince, that he was on the Giants staff. They're going to think of Vince Lombardi as, he was always the Packers coach and that's all he ever did. No, absolutely not.
Another fact about Vince, he's actually buried in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
The street that takes you to Giant Stadium, MetLife, if you care to call it that, it's named after Vince Lombardi. Vince Lombardi has his fingerprints all over this organization. This is a team that won championships in the old Yankee Stadium. They have won 4 championships in the state of New York, and they have won 4 championships in the state of New Jersey. When I think about the biggest wins for the New York Giants, or just iconic moments, it goes without saying the greatest game ever played against the Baltimore Colts, the then Baltimore Colts, championship game lost in Yankee Stadium. I think about our very first Super Bowl. This is a team that was going through a very hard drought, and this is a team that also saw the other New York team, newly from the NFL into the NFL, win first, that being the New York Jets, Broadway Joe era. But when I think about what else did this team contribute, maybe on a lighter level, we're the first guys to do the Gatorade shower. It was actually born against the Denver Broncos.
Yeah.
I think about, like I said it on the previous, when we were talking about the Niners. Giants changed history that day. For better or for worse, they changed history that day because the 49ers dynasty literally died that day, whereas the Dallas Cowboy dynasty was around the corner. The Giants also, with the help of the Cowboys and Redskins, basically the NFC East division, during that early 90s stretch, was able to make sure that the Buffalo Bills were ringless and winless. You fast forward into the 2000s and the 2010s, 2 victories over the most successful organization over those 2 decades, that being, of course, their former defensive coordinator, Bill Belichick, his team, the New England Patriots, and 18-1. That is, there's only 3 teams in the history of the sport that have gone 18-1. The Patriots are the only one that doesn't have a championship to put next to that, but yet most people in any circle would tell you that of the 3, they were probably the best team. Giants are the only team to win a Super Bowl in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and 2010s. Zappy earlier talked about Denver being in Super Bowls for 5 decades. Giants have won Super Bowls in each of the last 4. And similar to New England, whose first Super Bowl was in 85. I made mention how they lead the NFL in most Super Bowl appearances since their very first one. Guess who's number 2 since their first one, which would be the very next year? That would be the New York Giants.
And man, you got to talk about too, when you look at the team history, you're talking about a team that has been around for a very long time, and there's only 2 teams that have more wins than them. It's the Bears and the Packers.
Soon
Only
to be
two
3.
teams.
I do agree with you that the Pittsburgh Steelers probably have the inside track. And I'm not ashamed of that because when I think about the NFC East and the way we beat the crap out of each other, I don't expect that. Listen, the North has been good for more recency. But the Ravens and Steelers, some people feel, it's the best rivalry in football right now. I don't have a problem saying that consistently. But this is still new in the grand scheme of things. Giants and Eagles dates back to 33. Packers and Bears dates back to 1925. Patriots and Jets dates back to never because the Jets never freaking. The point to be made is like we as Giant fans, and I'm very proud of this. I'm very proud of this. I don't know who the GOAT is. That's always debatable, and we could always go into these things in terms of quarterback play. But all I know is that every championship that my team ever won in the Super Bowl era, we had to go through both those guys twice. Mm-hmm. So when you go through guys on that level, I think it speaks volumes about your legitimacy because you didn't just beat anybody. You beat the best.
21 Hall of Famers. 21 Hall of Famers. That speaks volumes about the team. 21 Hall of Famers. What they had to go through, like you said. And not only did they go on to the Super Bowl and defeat the New England Patriots, where we saw one of the most unbelievable plays when an Eli Manning should have been sacked, get out of that, to throw the ball deep, not in one Super Bowl, but twice in two of the most remarkable catches, one with David Tyree in 2007 and the other one with Mario Manningham. I mean, a tippy-toe catch.
In my opinion, that might be the greatest throw of Eli's entire career.
That was, and while people will sit there and say, "Oh, David Tyree, he caught it with his helmet," it doesn't matter. That Mario Manningham catch, in my opinion, was a much better because the room for error was a lot smaller than that catch by Tyree.
And Manningham, like the way Eli put that ball, is that the only person on the field that could have caught it was Manningham. He was either going to catch it or get popped and drop it, but it wasn't going to be a turnover. It wasn't going to be game altering, like when, Giant fans almost had an attack when Eli almost threw that pick to Asante 4 years earlier. Another fact about the Giants, Emlyn Tunnell, first African-American to be inducted in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And yes, he is our legend. Just phenomenal history, man.
And the other thing we cannot forget to mention, well, we talk about Hall of Famers, we make an argument about Rodney Hampton. He deserves to be in there.
Yeah, he's come up a lot. I look at that rough, dark age, and it's not the same thing that people that watched him in the 70s would say, because that was way worse. But when I think about Giants football in the 90s, right after the Super Bowl, Lawrence Taylor's retired a couple of years later.
By your boy Navarro.
Mark Bavaro, he's out of the mix. But the point I'm making is Phil Simms is gone a few years after that. They retire, he and Lawrence Taylor. It was a dark era for quarterback play. Rodney Hampton was the lone star on those teams that consistently went to Pro Bowls. And it was a very tough era.
We talk about Lawrence Taylor. I think we also have to mention somebody who I don't want to say people forget.
They
but
do.
When you look at a statistical factor from the defensive side of the ball, had more sacks than Lawrence Taylor, who was very instrumental in the reason why Tom Brady does not have 9 Super Bowls to his name. That's Michael Strahan.
That being Michael Strahan. In my opinion, anywhere between number 4 and number 6 on the all-time defensive end list. Some people might have him as high as 3. I think the king is Reggie White at that position. And after Reggie, it's debatable. Some people will say Deacon Jones. Some people will say Bruce Smith. I would say Bruce Smith. I have Strahan no lower than 4, no lower than 6, no higher than 4. He is right amongst the top 5, in my opinion.
Yeah, because you got to. When I look at it this way too, Michael Strahan always played with his hand on the ground, where Kevin Green, he's played standing up a lot of his career. Julius Peppers played a lot of his career with his hand on the ground, but he also played standing up. So those are factors that I look into too as well. So when you look at greatest defensive ends, I think he's number 3. I really do. I think he's right there with Reggie. I mean, Reggie White is.
I mean, I tried to the best of my ability to pay homage to those that came before. But it is hard for me to really, truly believe that Deacon Jones can do to an offensive tackle what Michael Strahan can, just off of sheer brute force. And that's no knock on the impact that Deacon Jones made on the game. I think it speaks more to the level of just bigger guys and more athletic guys. I mean, past White, past Bruce Smith, yeah, I think you very well maybe Michael Strahan after that.
It is, and I mean we could go on and on about the New York Giants and the history that they've since their existence. What was it, 1933?
1925.
25. Oh, Eagles Giants was 33. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but it's just what they have done all together as a team. Like we said, we've alluded to the fact that they have so many wins as a franchise.
Ever most recently, Brian Dable doing something that not even Bill Parcells did. Not even Tom Coughlin did. And that's win a playoff game in his first year as the head coach of the Giants. And things are looking up. And I look at it as like another chapter to another layer of a very long storybook. And quite frankly, that's how I view the New York Giants. When I think about not just in football, but greatest organizations in all of sport, New York Giants are definitely hitting the top 10 list.
And the only reason why they're not the greatest team out of New York is because the other team out of New York, while not a professional football team, they've won just a few more championships altogether than the New York Giants.
Well, yeah. I mean, in that regard, it really puts into perspective that next level. But yeah, I can't complain. I refuse to complain. I've seen the Giants just pull off some of the most miraculous wins over the course. And, you alluded to it earlier on the previous show, how the Giants have never had a dynasty. And I have had conversations with fellow Giant fans about this. Would you rather be a dynasty or would you rather be always relevant? And I do think that it's like a give and a take and a give and a take. And yes, I would like to hope that one day in time we do go back to back. And maybe one day in time we do have a dynasty. But I must say, when I look at the entire book of it, the whole history, it makes me proud to know that this team has won with 3 different quarterbacks during the Super Bowl era. It's pretty amazing that, those 4 different decades to win one.
And coaches.
They're one of a very, 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 very small list of teams to win with 3 different quarterbacks. I think everyone knows who's the other one.
That would be
the number 1 team. We'll get into that right now. But my Cowboys didn't do it with 3 different quarterbacks.
Mm-mm.
The Steelers didn't do it with 3 different quarterbacks.
The Redskins would be joining the team that we have at number 1.
And it watched exactly. It's just so much to speak highly of. It really is. But for our number 1 team, Richie, take it.
The Green Bay Packers, Titletown USA, the original NFL champs, and also the final champs of the pre-merger era. I do think that, unfortunately, this is a dynasty that gets overlooked a little too frequently because of the fact that the merger ran into the Super Bowl era, where people forget just how dominant this Green Bay Packers team is, because I think you can make an argument that the team of the early 60s was better than the team of the mid to late 60s, the 2 that ended up winning the original Super Bowls. You talk about iconic players. You talk about all of it. Vince Lombardi, in my opinion, saved this organization from going defunct and to just totally fallen out. This is the only team in the NFL that is owned by the people, essentially, by the people.
Yeah.
That is one of the true rarities and what kind of gives everybody a true hometown feel about what this team means to the league. And you said it. Lombardi went there. He leaves the big city. The team. It was always his dream to be the Giants head coach. Ultimately, he put his dream on hold to make a lot of other dreams come true. And I think if I was going to lock up Vince Lombardi's legacy in a couple of words, that would essentially be it. We talk about Bart Starr being that guy, the Ice Bowl, one of the most iconic games ever against your Dallas Cowboys. We talk about the beatings they put on my New York Giants post Lombardi. You know, we talk about Brett Favre, the Iron Man streak. That is one streak that even in a less physical NFL will never be broken. Eli Manning had an outside shot, but I don't even think Eli would have caught him. I think just Eli being second on that list at the time was a hell of an accomplishment in its own right. Oh, man. You talk about Aaron Rodgers currently on a darkness retreat. You're talking about all of it. Ray Nitschke. You're talking about Hallis versus Lombardi. The frozen tundra. The third coldest game in NFL history. You know?
There's a lot. And, you know, you guys were talking about LeBron James and longevity. That's the one thing about this team is they are the definition of longevity because they've been around the longest.
Yeah.
We're talking about a team that has won 15 championships, 11 pre-merger, 4 post, have been to 5 Super Bowls, lost one to the Steelers, came very close. I'm sorry, won that one against the Steelers, lost to the Broncos. I apologize. But then when you talk also about longevity, Bart Starr, Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers. 3 quarterbacks that, I mean, if I was a Packer fan.
They're at 13. I know that you knew that, but you said they're at 13.
Oh, I'm sorry.
9 pre-4.
Well, I said 15. I apologize.
No,
yeah, so, you know, but like this Packers team, we're talking about the all-time leader in wins. We're talking about when people say the GOAT of quarterbacks, people will base it on championships alone. But Aaron Rodgers could very well be in that conversation as well as Brett Favre. But what hurts their argument is that they each have 1 Super Bowl. You know, we're talking about the rich history behind
it's
the Green
kind of
Bay
mind-boggling. It's kind of mind-boggling when you think that even a guy like a Matt LaFleur, the newer coach, that he got off to a better start in terms of winning percentage than Curly Lambeau, Mike Holmgren, and Vince Lombardi, that Matt LaFleur could have that kind of impact that early in the game. It speaks volumes. There's just so much to it. And I think Mike Holmgren said it best when he addressed his team after they beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl, the Desmond Howard game, the Reggie White game. He said, this trophy is the pinnacle, and this is what it means. It means so much to anyone who wins it. But because of where we're from, it means just a little bit more to us. And quite frankly, I all I can say is it's true. You know, their namesake, Saint Vince. They called him Saint Vince for a reason because he literally saved that franchise. And to think that this many years removed, that you know the impact is still there. I thought it was pretty cool how the Super Bowl kind of recreated the Lombardi character for that presentation pre-game. I thought that was pretty cool.
You know what I would love? Call me crazy about this. Whenever Lambeau decides to go away, which it might happen because they're going to get rid of Soldier Field.
Not the same thing, but I get you though.
Yeah, but if it does happen, I would love to see that Super Bowl played in that stadium to pay homage to everybody before that.
It would be cool, but it would never happen. And I'll tell you why it would never happen. They just don't have enough seats.
I mean,
They don't. I mean, in today's
people pay a
NFL,
lot of money for that.
Anything's possible because, but when you think about like, nah, it won't happen. They won't do it because they already tried that in MetLife and they regretted doing it after seeing, it won't happen again. But you are noticing that trend with these cold weather teams going indoors.
and plus talking about MetLife, you saw. I mean, we were very close to talking about MetLife being the Super Bowl there being postponed a week because of weather.
Yeah.
Where in Green Bay, it is expected. It is expected. Yeah. And I mean, it's asking a lot to tell fans that you're going to spend $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 for a ticket, and I guarantee you they would be a lot more than that because of the simple fact that the amount of fans that can fit into that stadium. But you're asking a lot of these fans to spend, we'll say, $10,000 for the cheapest seat to be sitting in negative temperatures with the wind chill. It's one of those. It won't happen. Not in today's NFL. Not in today's. And it's a sad thing because absolutely. To pay homage to, when you think of all these stadiums around, while people will sit there and talk about AT&T Stadium being such a work of art, or talking about SoFi Stadium, when you talk about stadiums and the history, there's nothing that tops Lambeau Field. There's absolutely nothing that does. And it's too much. And I just don't think the NFL would present that. There are crazy fans out there, just like Bills Mafia.
I think what encapsulates the town, I mean, it's cool, man. Like every street's named after a player. I think what's pretty cool about that town too, a friend of the show, William Barnum Floyd, former Super Bowl champion, 94 49ers, as well as a national champion the year previous with Florida State University. I spoke to him on the phone briefly, and he was kind of filling me in on some of his experiences in the NFL. And he told me, he says, one thing that you could always bank on in Green Bay, and he says, let's be honest, they usually beat us if we played them there because, back then they just didn't lose at home. He says, no matter the weather, no matter what's happening, no matter the result of the game, you can bet that those Packer fans are going to meet you outside with a beer and a brat. And he was just so proud about essentially just saying what kind of caliber of fan they got out there. I could speak on it from a personal level. Good friends, the Olsens, they're from Scandinavia. We did a huge fan base show back in the day on the Jordan Patrick show for that. And I mean, my own father, for a litany of reasons, adopted the Packer as his team at a young age. And, you made a mention how, you got that team that you kind of pull for. Well, essentially they're mine because, my rule was always, if they don't affect the Giants, I don't mind pulling for them. That was always kind of like my rule. My old man tried to convert me time and time again. That just wasn't to be. He got my little sister. My little sister is a Packer fan, not me. But they are the creme de la creme of the NFL, and they've earned the right to be that.
Absolutely. And, I will say they are the one team. Got what, a minute and 20 seconds left? They are the one team in the NFL that, while I hate them, considering the history behind Dallas.
Yeah, you guys have some good history there.
They're the one team I want to see win one more time, and that's for a good friend of ours, John Olsen. When you talk about people and you talk about your father, John Olsen's a father figure to all the three of us. Yeah. And that's a team right there for him that I would love to see hoist the Lombardi one more time. And who knows, maybe Jordan Love is the next one. Just maybe. We'll see.
Yeah, Jordan Love's time is coming. So is the time of this show. For Brett and Zappy, I thank you guys very much for watching, staying up late. I think this is the first time that I've ever done 3 consecutive live shows, but that is essentially what we have done tonight. Until next time, we are out.